I would say definitely one of the most controversial Supreme Court cases in my time, anyways, would be Dobbs V Jackson. Now, if you're not aware what Dobbs V Jackson is, it was basically that abortion is overturned back to the states. Now, of course, there's various ethical, moral, theological, left-right debates that could, of course, occur. But, just looking at it as a case, as an actual Supreme Court case, looking at, is it government overreach? Is it not government overreach? Dobbs v. Jackson is actually legally perfect. It's a legally perfect case. The Supreme Court did exactly what they should have done. Of course, it wasn't a, 8-1 decision. I'm not exactly sure what the decision was, but it was probably pretty split, considering the makeup of the court nowadays. But pretty much, the 10th Amendment says all powers not regulated in the Constitution to the federal government goes back to the states. And if you can show me anywhere in the Constitution where it says there's something about abortion, then those rights should be delegated to the states. Now, of course, people argue the due process clause of the 14th and the 5th Amendment, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But then again, those are just debates. And, technically, according to the 10th Amendment and the Constitution, no powers are regulated to the federal government specifically about abortion. So therefore, according to the 10th Amendment, all powers should be regulated, therefore, to the states. And of course, the states decide, and there was various decisions among the states. And of course, that's why you have states. If you don't like your state's decision, you're not in the population makeup of the state. And they go like that's one of the main reasons picking a state to live in is the population makeup, the demographic makeup, the political makeup of that state. Then yeah, there's probably going to be a decision you don't like. But I mean, just looking at it legally, does abortion count as due process? Is denying you an abortion taking your liberty from you? I would say taking your liberty from you. That's like your freedom. Like throwing you in jail. Excessive taxation. I feel like it could be totally wrong. This is probably getting a little more. I wanted to keep this discussion obviously totally logical, not logical, law related. But I feel like it could be wrong. A lot of time, there are some, of course there are some, instances that, do occur otherwise, but I feel like a lot of times, abortions are, misused, to put it in the slightest, people don't want to, use contraceptives correctly, don't want to wrap their willy sometimes, but, there again, I don't necessarily think, under the 14th Amendment, keeping this completely law-related debate, I don't think that denying somebody an abortion is taking their liberty away from you. Like when they wrote about the Constitution, their liberty was, I have no say in this, I have no choice, I have to do this. And you very much do have a choice when it comes to abortion. Unless you were raped, you could have, wrapped your willy, you could have used contraceptives, So with that being said, keeping this completely, law-related, I think that the Dobbs v. Jackson case is, completely perfect. I think it is a perfect, logical, law-related case, and I think the Supreme Court made the right choice. All powers not regulated. There's nothing in the Constitution that says anything about abortion. And I don't think denying someone abortion is against their liberty. Again, I'm not sitting here and having a theological debate with anybody in that nature, moral or otherwise, completely keeping it, law-related, as it should be, because it was a Supreme Court case. I think it should have went back to the states. I think anything else, anything at all, banning it or unbanning it is complete government overreach. Because again, it's not relegated in the Constitution anything about abortion. So, I think the government was going to say, well, states can't ban abortion. I feel like that's government overreach. And if the government was to say, abortions get banned, I still feel like that's government overreach. So with that being said, I feel like Dobbs v. Jackson is a perfectly fine court case. I feel like the Supreme Court makeup, I feel like they did a good job. You say a lot about the Supreme Court, but I feel like they did good on Dobbs v. Jackson. With that being said, stay safe and stay hydrated.